Older human apologizes to his mail-order bride for his age. War and farming did this to me. The sun was setting over the rolling fields of Terra Colony 9, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson. Jeremy Harker stood at the edge of his property, his weathered hands gripping the wooden fence he'd built 15 years ago. At 67, his body felt twice that age, joints stiff from decades of tilling alien soil, muscles aching from the constant battle against this planet's stubborn vegetation. He hadn't always been a farmer. The military insignia buried in his dresser drawer told a different story. Captain Jeremy Harker, 31st Interstellar Infantry, the man who'd led the charge during the Battle of Proxima Ridge, the sole human survivor of the Nix massacre. "Damn fool," he muttered to himself, running calloused fingers through his already steel-gray hair. 3 months ago, in a moment of weakness, or perhaps clarity, he'd contacted the Universal Partnership Agency. He still couldn't believe he'd done it. A mail-order bride at his age. The agency specialized in connecting lonely settlers with companions from across the galaxy, but Jeremy had never expected a response. Yet here he was, waiting. The transport was already 10 minutes late. Maybe she'd seen his picture and backed out. He wouldn't blame her. The mirror didn't lie. His once handsome face was now a roadmap of wrinkles. His bright blue eyes faded to the color of a stormy sky. War had taken his youth, and farming had claimed what little remained. A distant hum broke the evening silence. Jeremy squinted against the setting sun, making out the silhouette of a small shuttle descending toward his landing pad. His heart hammered against his ribs like it hadn't done since his first firefight. "Pull yourself together, old man," he growled, straightening his cleanest work shirt. He'd bathed twice and even trimmed his beard, but there was no disguising what he was, a broken-down farmer with more years behind him than ahead. The shuttle touched down, kicking up dust that swirled in the dying light. Jeremy stood his ground, fighting the urge to turn and flee to his cabin. The hatch opened with a pneumatic hiss, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then she appeared. She stepped out gracefully, her movements fluid like water. Her skin was a soft shade of blue that seemed to capture the twilight, adorned with subtle patterns that shimmered when she moved. Long, snow-white hair cascaded down her back, contrasting with the simple gray dress that hugged her slender form. But it was her eyes that stopped Jeremy's breath, liquid silver reflecting the stars that were beginning to appear overhead. She was Lumidian, one of the most revered species in the galaxy for their beauty and empathy. And she was here, on his farm, looking at him with those impossible eyes. Jeremy suddenly felt every one of his years pressing down on him like a physical weight. What had he been thinking? This creature belonged in the gardens of some galactic senator, not wasting away on a frontier farm with a used-up soldier. She approached him, carrying a single bag, her bare feet barely disturbing the dust beneath them. When she stood before him, Jeremy realized she was tall for her species, the top of her head reaching his chin. "You are Jeremy Harker?" Her voice was melodic, with an accent that made his name sound like poetry. "Yes, ma'am," he managed, his own voice rough from years of shouting over machinery and the screams of dying men. "I'm Jeremy." She studied him, those silver eyes taking in every line on his face, every gray hair, every scar. He waited for the disappointment, the polite excuse, the request to be taken back to the transport station. Instead, she smiled, a gentle curve of pale blue lips. "I am Elora. It is an honor to meet you, Jeremy Harker." He nodded stiffly, unsure what to say. They stood in awkward silence until a gust of wind made her shiver slightly. "Let's get you inside," he said, reaching for her bag. "It gets cold quick once the sun's down." She allowed him to take her bag, but when he turned toward the cabin, a sharp pain shot through his back. He stiffened, trying to hide the grimace, but Elora noticed immediately. "You are in pain," she said, not a question, but a statement of fact. "It's nothing. Old injury." He forced himself to straighten. "The cabin's not far." By the time they reached the porch, Jeremy's legs were trembling with exhaustion. The day's work combined with the stress of waiting had drained what little energy he had. He fumbled with the door, finally pushing it open to reveal his modest home. Clean but sparse, with handmade furniture and few decorations. "It's not much," he said apologetically, setting her bag down. but it's solid. Built it myself. Elora entered, her eyes taking in everything. You have created a home here? That is more than many have. Jeremy nodded, then winced as another spasm gripped his back. He tried to hide it, but Elora was already at his side, her touch gentle on his arm. Please sit, she said, guiding him to his chair by the fireplace. Before he could protest, she was kneeling before him, her slender fingers working at the laces of his heavy work boots. You don't need to, he began. I wish to, she interrupted, her silver eyes meeting his. Allow me this. Too tired to argue, Jeremy watched as she removed his boots and socks, revealing feet calloused and gnarled from decades of hard labor. Without hesitation, she went to the kitchen and returned with a basin of warm water, kneeling again to place his feet in it. The sensation of warm water and her gentle touch brought an unexpected lump to his throat. How long had it been since anyone had shown him such care? I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Elora looked up, her expression puzzled. Better? Jeremy gestured to himself, to his weathered body and lined face. Forgive me for being so old. War and hard labor made me this way. You should have been matched with someone younger, someone with more to offer. Her hands stilled on his feet, and for a moment she was silent. Then she rose slightly, her face level with his. You are exactly the kind of man I have been looking for, she said softly. A man with a strong heart and a kind soul. In her silver eyes, Jeremy saw something he hadn't expected. Not pity, but genuine warmth. And something else. Something hidden behind that warmth. A shadow he couldn't quite identify. But in that moment, with her hands still cradling his tired feet, Jeremy felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Hope. Jeremy woke before dawn, as he had every day for the past 30 years. For a moment he lay still, listening to the unfamiliar sound of soft breathing beside him. With the events of the previous night came rushing back. Elora preparing a simple meal from his meager supplies, their awkward conversation over dinner, and finally his insistence that she take his bed while he slept on the old couch. She had refused, of course. We are to be partners, she'd said firmly. I will not displace you from your own bed. In the end, they'd shared it, lying stiffly on opposite sides with a respectful gap between them. Yet somehow during the night that gap had closed. Her warmth radiated against his side, a sensation so foreign it almost hurt. Carefully, Jeremy eased himself up, trying not to wake her. The first light of dawn filtered through the window, casting a pale glow across the bed. Elora's white hair spread across the pillow like spilled moonlight, and in sleep, her face held a vulnerability that tugged at something deep in Jeremy's chest. As he watched, a shaft of sunlight crept across the bed, illuminating her bare shoulder where her nightdress had slipped down. Jeremy froze. In the direct light, what he'd taken for decorative patterns on her blue skin revealed themselves as something else entirely. Intricate markings that seemed to shift and change as she breathed, forming symbols he didn't recognize. Instinctively, he reached out, his weathered fingertips hovering just above the strange markings. They seemed to pulse with a life of their own, like bioluminescent creatures beneath the surface of her skin. Elora's eyes snapped open, silver irises locking onto his with startling intensity. Jeremy jerked his hand back. I'm sorry, he stammered. I didn't mean to. It's all right, she said, pulling her nightdress back up to cover the markings. You were bound to notice eventually. What are they? Jeremy asked, unable to mask his curiosity. Elora sat up, drawing the blanket around her shoulders. They are a record of sorts, a history written on skin. They're beautiful, Jeremy said honestly. A smile touched her lips, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Not everyone thinks so. Before he could ask more, a harsh buzzing sound cut through the morning quiet, the farm's perimeter alert. Jeremy cursed under his breath, reaching for his work pants. You stay here, he told Elora, pulling on his clothes with practiced efficiency despite his stiff joints. Probably just a wild thresher beast in the fields again. But as he stepped onto the porch, binoculars in hand, his stomach nodded. Not a thresher beast, a government transport, its sleek form unmistakable even at a distance, kicking up dust as it approached along the access road. Shit, he muttered, the Planetary Immigration Bureau. They weren't due to check on Alora's residency status for at least a month. He felt her presence before he heard her, a subtle shift in the air as she joined him on the porch. "They've come for me," she said quietly. Jeremy turned to find her fully dressed, her white hair neatly braided, her expression calm but resigned. "What do you mean?" "This is just routine." "No," she interrupted gently. "It's not. Lumidians are rarely approved for interspecies marriages, especially to humans. They're here to investigate how I circumvented the regulations." Jeremy's protective instincts flared, old military training kicking in. "Did you circumvent regulations?" Her silver eyes met his, unflinching. "Yes." The transport was getting closer, maybe 5 minutes out. Jeremy ran a hand through his gray hair, mind racing. "Whatever you did, whatever you're running from..." "I'm not a criminal, Jeremy," she said, her voice steady. "At least, not by any moral standard I recognize." "Then why?" "Because my kind are considered too valuable to be wasted on aging human farmers," she said, a hint of bitterness in her melodic voice. "We're meant to be decorative companions for high officials, diplomatic gifts, exotic entertainers, not wives to war veterans on frontier worlds." Something in her words sparked a fierce heat in Jeremy's chest. Not anger at her deception, but at the system that would reduce anyone, to a commodity. "So you forged documents?" "I had help. From someone who believes Lumidians should choose their own paths." The transport was close enough now that Jeremy could make out the PIB insignia on its side. He had maybe 3 minutes to decide. "Why me?" he asked, the question that had burned in him since she'd arrived. "You could have chosen anyone. Someone younger, with more to offer." Elora stepped closer, her hand finding his. Her touch was cool against his sun-roughened skin. "Because I saw your eyes in your application," she said softly. "Eyes that have seen too much death but still hold kindness. Because your hands have built things instead of only destroying. Because you apologize for your age as if it were a failing. Not understanding that to my people, age is wisdom, experience, strength." Her other hand came up to touch his face, tracing a deep line beside his mouth. "Every mark on your skin is a story, Jeremy Harker. I want to learn them all." The sincerity in her voice stole his breath. In that moment, something shifted between them, the awkward politeness of strangers giving way to something warmer, more urgent. Jeremy found himself leaning toward her, drawn by a pull as natural as gravity. Her lips met his halfway, cool and soft, and tasting faintly of the sweet tea they'd shared the night before. The kiss deepened, her arms winding around his neck as his hands found her waist. For a moment, the approaching transport, the questions, the years between them, all of it faded away, leaving only the press of her body against his and a hunger he'd thought long dead. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jeremy rested his forehead against hers. "I should have asked first," he said roughly. Elora's laugh was like distant chimes. "I would have said yes." The sound of the transport's engines grew louder, snapping them back to reality. Jeremy straightened, his military bearing returning as he made his decision. "Whatever they ask, follow my lead," he said, his voice taking on the command tone that had once led men into battle. "You're my wife now. Papers or no papers. And no bureaucrat is going to tell me otherwise." Elora's silver eyes widened slightly, then filled with a fierce light that matched his own. "Yes, husband," she said, the words sending a shiver down his spine. As the transport touched down in his yard, Jeremy took Elora's hand, feeling the strange markings pulse against his palm like a second heartbeat. Whatever she was hiding, whatever storm was coming, they would face it together. The PB officials had been thorough, intrusive, and ultimately unsatisfied. For 3 hours, they'd questioned Jeremy and Elora separately, probing for inconsistencies in their story. Jeremy had fallen back on his military training, answering with just enough detail to seem cooperative, while revealing nothing of substance. When they finally left, the sun was already dipping toward the horizon. Jeremy watched their transport disappear into the distance, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. "They'll be back," he said as Elora joined him on the porch. "They didn't believe us." "No," she agreed softly. "They didn't." Inside, Jeremy poured them each a finger of the whiskey he saved for special occasions, or particularly bad days. This qualified as both. They asked about your markings, he said, handing her a glass. Seemed very interested in them. Allura accepted the drink, her fingers brushing his in a way that sent warmth up his arm despite the tension. What did you tell them? That they were cultural, traditional. That I found them beautiful. He took a sip, letting the liquor burn away some of his anger. I didn't mention that they seemed to move. She smiled faintly. Thank you. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the old mechanical clock Jeremy had brought from Earth. Finally, Allura set down her glass. I need to tell you everything, she said. You deserve to know what you've become involved in. Jeremy nodded, settling deeper into his chair. I'm listening. Allura's silver eyes seemed to glow in the dimming light. What do you know about Lumidian empaths? Not much, Jeremy admitted. Stories mostly. That some of your people can sense emotions, influence them sometimes. Those stories are simplified but essentially correct. Allura's markings began to shimmer faintly as she spoke. True empaths are rare among my kind, perhaps 1 in 10,000. Those with the gift are identified young and utilized. Utilized, Jeremy repeated, not liking the sound of that. As diplomatic tools primarily, placed beside galactic leaders to read intentions, smooth negotiations, her voice hardened, or as intelligence assets, extracting information from prisoners without leaving physical evidence of torture. Jeremy's grip tightened on his glass. And you're one of these empaths. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. More than that, I'm what my people call a deep reader. I can access memories, not just surface emotions. She looked down at her hands. It's a rare ability, even among empaths. That's why they want you back, Jeremy said, pieces falling into place. You're valuable. To many factions, she confirmed. The Lumidian Council, certainly, but also the Vexari Dominion, the Terran Intelligence Directorate, anyone who could use my abilities for their advantage. Jeremy frowned. The Vexari? Those bastards were behind the Nyx massacre. Allura's head snapped up, her eyes widening. You fought against the Vexari? Fought them, killed them, watched them kill my friends. The old rage bubbled up in Jeremy's chest. Lost my entire squad at Nyx. I was the only human who made it out. Understanding dawned on Allura's face. That's why I was drawn to you. Why I chose you specifically. What do you mean? She leaned forward, her markings pulsing more visibly now. Jeremy, the minds of those who've experienced severe trauma, especially combat trauma, they're different. Harder to read, harder to track psychically. Your mental scars create a shield of sorts. You're saying my screwed up head is hiding you? Jeremy let out a short, harsh laugh. That's a new one. Not just hiding me, Allura said earnestly, protecting me. When I'm near you, I can rest. For the first time in years, I can lower my mental defenses without fear of being detected. Jeremy set his glass down, processing this information. So you chose me because I'm damaged. Because I'm useful. Hurt flashed across Allura's face. No, I chose you because when I saw your application, I sensed something rare. A mind that had seen darkness but hadn't surrendered to it. A soul that remained kind, despite everything it had endured. She reached for his hand. The protection your mind offers is a gift, yes, but it's not why I'm here. Her touch was electric, sending sparks up his arm. Jeremy found himself believing her, not just because he wanted to, but because something in her silver eyes spoke of a loneliness that matched his own. What happens now? He asked, his voice rougher than he intended. They'll return with more officials, perhaps military personnel. Her fingers tightened around his. I should leave before they do. My presence puts you in danger. No! The word came out with the snap of a command. You're my wife now, remember. On paper or not, Allura's lips parted in surprise. Jeremy, you don't understand the risk. I understand risk just fine, he interrupted. Spent 20 years assessing it in combat. The way I see it, you've been running and hiding your whole life. How's that working out for you? She blinked, taken aback by his directness. Exactly, Jeremy continued. So we try something different. We stand our ground, together. They'll come with force next time, she warned. Jeremy smiled grimly. Let them. This is my land, my home, and you're under my protection now. The conviction in his voice seemed to stir something in Elora. Her markings flared brighter, casting blue-white light across her features. You would fight for me? She asked, wonder in her voice. A woman you barely know? I've fought for less, Jeremy said honestly, and I'd like the chance to know you better. The air between them changed, charged with something beyond words. Elora rose from her chair in one fluid motion, moving to stand before him. Without hesitation, she lowered herself onto his lap, her weight a welcome pressure against his tired body. Then know me, she whispered, framing his face with her cool hands. Their lips met with none of the hesitancy of their earlier kiss. This was hunger, raw and unfiltered. Jeremy's hands found her waist, then slid lower, pulling her closer as her fingers tangled in his gray hair. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elora rested her forehead against his. I want to share something with you, she murmured, something intimate among my people. What is it? Jeremy asked, his voice a low rumble. A mental connection. Not deep reading. I would never invade your privacy that way, but a sharing of sensation, of feeling. Her silver eyes searched his. It would allow you to feel what I feel, and me to feel what you feel. It's intense. Jeremy considered for only a moment before nodding. Show me. Elora's markings blazed like starlight as she placed her palms against his temples. Close your eyes, she instructed softly. Jeremy obeyed and immediately felt a gentle pressure at the edges of his consciousness, like a cool stream flowing around a stone. He tensed instinctively. Relax, Elora whispered against his lips. Let me in. Slowly, deliberately, Jeremy lowered the mental barriers he'd built over decades of war and solitude. The cool pressure increased, then suddenly, sensation flooded him, not just his own desire, but Elora's as well. A doubled, mirrored hunger that took his breath away. He could feel his own rough hands on her skin as if he were the one being touched, could sense her pleasure at the texture of his weathered palms. More than that, he could feel her emotions, her wonder at his willingness to protect her, her relief at finding sanctuary after so long, and beneath it all, a growing affection that matched his own. Elora, he gasped, overwhelmed by the dual experience. I know, she breathed, equally affected. I know. Their shared sensation built as they moved together in the dim light of the cabin, the boundaries between them blurring until Jeremy wasn't sure where he ended, and she began. In that moment of perfect unity, he understood what she'd meant about rest. There was a peace in this connection that he'd never known in all his years of solitude. Later, as they lay tangled in his bed, the mental link fading to a gentle hum, Jeremy traced the now dormant markings on Elora's shoulder. We'll need a plan, he said quietly, for when they come back. Elora nodded against his chest. Yes, but not tonight. She pressed a kiss to the scar that ran along his collarbone. Tonight, let's just be husband and wife. As sleep claimed him, Jeremy realized he hadn't felt this young in decades. Jeremy woke to screaming, not audible screaming. The cabin was silent except for the pre-dawn chirping of native insects, but a psychic wail that somehow bypassed his ears entirely and resonated directly in his mind. He bolted upright, disoriented. Beside him, Elora was thrashing, her body arched in apparent agony. The markings on her skin blazed with such intensity that they illuminated the entire room in pulsing blue-white light. Elora! Jeremy grabbed her shoulders, trying to steady her. What's happening? Her silver eyes snapped open, but they weren't seeing him. They stared through him, pupils dilated to black pools ringed by thin silver halos. They're scanning, she gasped, her voice distorted as if speaking through water. Hunting? So strong. Another spasm racked her body. Jeremy held her firmly, his military training kicking in as he assessed the situation. This wasn't a physical attack. It was psychic, targeted at Elora's mind. Fight it, he urged. You're stronger than they are. Elora's markings flared brighter, patterns shifting rapidly across her blue skin like lightning in storm clouds. The air in the cabin seemed to thicken, pressing against Jeremy's eardrums until they popped. "Can't," she choked out. "Too many. Coordinated attack." Jeremy's mind raced. She'd said his trauma-scarred mind created a shield that protected her. Could he extend that protection somehow? Acting on instinct, he pulled Elora against his chest, wrapping his body around hers as if he could physically block the psychic assault. He concentrated on the mental connection they'd shared the night before, trying to recreate that sense of merged consciousness. "Focus on me," he commanded, pressing his forehead to hers. "My mind, my thoughts, nothing else." For a moment, nothing changed. Then gradually, he felt a cool pressure against his consciousness. Elora, reaching for him psychically. He opened himself to her, dropping the barriers he'd maintained for decades. The moment their minds connected, Jeremy was nearly overwhelmed by the assault Elora was enduring. It felt like dozens of needles trying to pierce his thoughts, probing for weaknesses. Behind the attack, he sensed alien presences, cold, methodical, relentless. Gritting his teeth, Jeremy drew on decades of combat discipline. He'd withstood physical torture during the war. This was just another battlefield. He began constructing mental barriers, not to shut Elora out, but to enclose them both within his natural psychic shielding. Brick by brick, memory by memory, he built walls of pain and survival. The horror of watching his squad die at Nyx. The years of nightmares that followed. The backbreaking labor of carving a farm from hostile alien soil. Each traumatic memory strengthened the barrier, creating a fortress of shared consciousness. Gradually, the psychic pressure lessened. Elora's breathing steadied, her markings dimming from blinding brilliance to a soft glow. The alien presences receded, frustrated by the unexpected resistance. "They're withdrawing," Elora whispered, her voice returning to normal. "For now." Jeremy loosened his hold but didn't let go completely. Who were they? Vexari mindhunters. She shuddered against him. Elite psychic trackers. They've never been deployed against me before. The same Vexari from the war. Jeremy's jaw tightened. Those scale-faced bastards? Elora nodded weakly. The same. They must be working with whoever sent the PIB officials yesterday. It's an escalation I didn't anticipate. Jeremy helped her sit up, noting how the exertion had drained her. The vibrant blue of her skin had paled to a washed-out azure, and dark circles shadowed her silver eyes. "What you did," she said, touching his face with trembling fingers. "I've never experienced anything like it. You shouldn't have been able to shield us both." Jeremy shrugged, uncomfortable with her wonder. "Military training. You learn to compartmentalize. It's more than that." Her markings pulsed softly as she studied him. "Most humans have minimal psychic resistance, but your mind is like fortress walls built from scar tissue." "Not exactly flattering," Jeremy said with a wry smile. "It's magnificent," Elora countered seriously. "You've turned your pain into armor." Before he could respond, she leaned forward and kissed him, a kiss of gratitude, of admiration, of deepening connection. Despite the dangers surrounding them, Jeremy felt desire stir again, his body responding to her closeness with an urgency that belied his age. Elora sensed the change, her markings brightening as she pressed herself against him. "I can feel what you want," she murmured against his lips. "Is that your empathic ability, or just obvious?" Jeremy asked, his hands already finding the curves of her body through her thin nightdress. Her laugh was breathless. "Both." They came together with the desperate intensity of people who knew their time might be limited, finding in physical connection a temporary escape from the dangers closing in around them. Afterward, as the first rays of dawn filtered through the cabin windows, they lay entwined, planning their next move. "We need to prepare," Jeremy said, his tactical mind already mapping defensive positions around the farm. "If they sense psychic trackers, physical forces won't be far behind." "We should run," Elora argued, tracing the outline of an old battle scar on his shoulder. I can mask our trail psychically for a while." Jeremy shook his head. "Running means always looking over your shoulder. Trust me, I've seen what happens to refugees." "No, we make our stand here." Against the Vexari? Elora pushed herself up on one elbow, her expression troubled. Jeremy, they're not just physically formidable. They have technology far beyond what you faced in the war. And now they have psychic hunters working with them. They also have weaknesses, Jeremy countered. I killed enough of them to know. He rose from the bed, moving with purpose, despite the familiar ache in his joints. From beneath the floorboards under his bed, he retrieved a locked metal case he hadn't opened in 15 years. The biometric lock still recognized his thumbprint. Inside, nestled in protective foam, lay his service weapon, a TX-70 pulse rifle, still gleaming as if he'd cleaned it yesterday, along with several smaller sidearms and a combat knife. Military-grade weapons are illegal for civilians, Elora observed, watching him check the rifle's power cell. Jeremy gave her a look that made her smile despite herself. Right, she said. Not the time for legalities. I've got more than just guns, Jeremy said, closing the case and sliding it back under the floorboards. This farm isn't as defenseless as it looks. He dressed quickly in work clothes, but Elora noticed his movements were different now. More economical, more precise. The farmer was receding, the soldier re-emerging. What do you need me to do? She asked, pulling on her own clothes. Jeremy paused, studying her with new eyes, not just as his bride or a woman he desired, but as a tactical asset with unique abilities. Those markings, he said, when they were glowing during the attack, what exactly were you doing? Defending, she explained. Creating psychic barriers, deflecting their probes. Can you attack as well as defend? A slow smile spread across Elora's face, her silver eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. Oh yes, husband. I most certainly can. I need to show you something, Jeremy said, leading Elora to what appeared to be an ordinary storage shed behind the cabin. He pressed his palm against a weathered panel, and a hidden scanner hummed to life. The floor descended, revealing a military-grade bunker beneath the innocuous structure. Sweet mercy, Elora breathed as they stepped into the underground chamber. You've been preparing for war all along. Not war, Jeremy corrected, activating the lights. Just not being caught with my pants down again. The bunker contained an impressive array of defensive equipment, surveillance monitors, shield generators, automated turrets, and enough supplies to last months. In the center sat a communications console that looked far more advanced than anything a civilian farmer should possess. Colonial Defense Force tech, Jeremy explained, noting her expression. My old commanding officer, General Harrison, helped me acquire it after I settled here. You've maintained contact with your military? Elora asked, a note of concern in her voice. Not for years. Jeremy's fingers hovered over the activation panel. But Harrison owes me. His son was in my squad at Nix. I got the boy out alive. Elora placed her hand on his arm. If you contact him now, you'll expose our location to both human authorities and the Vexari. I know the risk, Jeremy said grimly, but we need backup. The Vexari don't send mine hunters unless they're planning something big. Before he could activate the communicator, Elora's markings suddenly flared. She grabbed Jeremy's arm, her silver eyes wide. They're here, she whispered. Scouts, 3 of them approaching from the eastern field. Jeremy moved to a surveillance panel, switching to thermal imaging. Sure enough, 3 heat signatures were moving through his crops, their elongated forms unmistakably Vexari. Damn it, he muttered. They're earlier than I expected. He grabbed his pulse rifle and a sidearm, checking both with practiced efficiency. Stay here. I'll handle them. No! Elora's voice was firm. I have an idea, but I need your help. Your memories. Jeremy paused. What do you mean? You've fought Vexari before. You know their weaknesses, their tactics. Her markings pulsed with increasing intensity. If we merge our minds again, I can access that knowledge directly. Use it to enhance my psychic abilities. Jeremy hesitated. The prospect of someone, even Elora, rummaging through his war memories made his stomach clench. He'd spent decades building walls around those experiences. It would be intimate, Elora added softly. More so than physical joining. I would see everything. Everything, Jeremy's voice was rough. Yes, your triumphs, your failures, your fears. She touched his face. But Jeremy, I would never judge you for them." He looked into her silver eyes and saw nothing but acceptance. With a short nod, he set down his weapons. "How do we do this?" Elora guided him to sit on a storage crate, then stood between his knees, placing her palms against his temples. "Open your mind to me, as you did during the attack, but this time focus on your combat memories, bring them to the surface." Jeremy closed his eyes, reluctantly summoning images he'd spent years suppressing. The Battle of Proxima Ridge, the ambush at Helios Station, the Nyx massacre. Elora's cool presence entered his mind, gentle but purposeful. Unlike the violent intrusion of the Vexari minehunters, her touch was like water flowing around the stones, respectful of boundaries even as she moved deeper. "Show me how you fought them," she whispered, both aloud and in his mind. Jeremy let the memories come. The Vexari's vulnerability to flanking maneuvers due to their limited peripheral vision, their tendency to protect their neck scales at the expense of their lower extremities, the distinctive clicking sound that preceded their psychic attacks. As Elora absorbed these tactical insights, her markings began to shift and change, forming new patterns that resembled military formations. Jeremy felt a strange feedback loop developing, his memories flowing into her, then returning enhanced by her psychic understanding, creating new hybrid tactics neither of them could have devised alone. "This is remarkable," Elora murmured, her voice taking on a deeper resonance. "Your mind holds so much practical knowledge, combined with my abilities." She stepped back, her entire body now illuminated from within, markings blazing with blue-white light. "I can fight them on both fronts now, physical and psychic." A warning chime from the surveillance system broke their connection. The Vexari scouts had reached the edge of the yard. "Time to test our new approach," Jeremy said, retrieving his weapons. "Stay behind me until we're in position." They emerged from the bunker to find the farm bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. The beauty of it struck Jeremy anew. This land he'd fought to tame. This home he'd built with his own hands. He'd be damned if he'd let the Vexari take it from him. The three scouts were moving with typical Vexari arrogance, making little effort to conceal themselves. Their scaled bodies gleamed dully in the sunlight, elongated heads swiveling as they surveyed the property. Jeremy and Elora took cover behind the barn, watching through a gap in the weathered boards. "Remember the plan," Jeremy whispered. "I'll draw their fire. You hit them with the psychic assault when they're distracted." Elora nodded, her markings pulsing with controlled energy. "Be careful, husband." The term sent a surge of warmth through Jeremy's chest. With a quick nod, he moved into position, circling around to approach the Vexari from their blind spot. The first scout never saw him coming. Jeremy's pulse rifle discharged with a muffled thump, and the Vexari dropped, a smoking hole where its neck scales had been. The other two reacted instantly, their own weapons raised as they emitted the clicking sound Jeremy remembered all too well. The prelude to a psychic attack. Before they could focus their abilities, Elora stepped into view, her body incandescent with psychic energy. The Vexari faltered, clearly surprised by the presence of a Lumidian. That moment of hesitation was all Jeremy needed. He fired again, winging one of the scouts in the shoulder. As it staggered, Elora thrust her hands forward, her markings forming intricate battle patterns Jeremy recognized from his own memories. The wounded Vexari screamed, a high, keening sound that raised the hair on Jeremy's neck. It clutched its elongated head, dropping to its knees as Elora's psychic assault overwhelmed its defenses. The third scout, displaying more intelligence than its companions, turned to flee. Jeremy tracked it with his rifle but held his fire. "Let it go," he called to Elora. "We want it to report back." She nodded, redirecting her psychic energy to completely incapacitate the wounded scout. Within moments, both remaining Vexari were unconscious. Jeremy approached cautiously, kicking away their weapons. "We need to restrain them before they wake up." As they secured the prisoners, Elora suddenly swayed, the light of her markings dimming. Jeremy caught her before she could fall. "That took more energy than I expected," she admitted, leaning against him. "Combining our techniques is powerful but draining." Jeremy helped her back to the cabin, settling her on the couch before retrieving water and ration bars from his emergency supplies. "Eat," he instructed. "You need to regain your strength. This was just the advance party. More will come." As Elora ate, Jeremy activated the communicator he'd brought from the bunker. I need to contact Harrison now. We've shown our hand, and the Vexari will know exactly what they are dealing with when these scouts don't report back on schedule. Elora nodded her agreement, too exhausted to argue. The communicator hummed to life, encryption protocols engaging automatically. After a tense minute, a gruff voice responded. "This is a restricted channel. Identify yourself." "Whiskey Tango 793, Jeremy replied using his old military code. "Requesting direct connection to General Harrison. Priority Alpha." A pause then. "Identity confirmed. Stand by for General Harrison." Jeremy exchanged a look with Elora. "This is it. No turning back now." Before she could respond, the communicator crackled again, and a familiar voice filled the cabin. "Harker? Is that really you, you old bastard?" Despite everything, Jeremy smiled. "Hello, sir. I need a favor." Dawn broke over Jeremy's farm with deceptive tranquility. Dew glistened on the crops, native birds called from the tree line, and for a moment, it was possible to forget that war was coming. Jeremy stood on his porch, pulse rifle in hand, watching the eastern horizon where the Vexari would appear. Beside him, Elora's markings pulsed with steady blue light as she extended her psychic awareness across the property. "Harrison's team is 10 minutes out," Jeremy said, checking the tactical display on his wrist unit. "The Vexari—" "Closer," Elora replied, her silver eyes distant. "At least 30 warriors, moving in formation." "And something else. A psychic presence I haven't encountered before. Powerful." Jeremy grimaced. "They brought a Mind Lord. Top-tier psychic warrior. Nasty bastards." "You faced one before?" Elora asked, her markings flickering with concern. "At Nyx." Jeremy's voice was flat. "It's how they broke through our defenses, turned half my squad against each other before we even knew what was happening." Elora's cool hand found his, fingers intertwining. "This time will be different." The certainty in her voice steadied him. In the 3 days since contacting Harrison, they'd prepared as thoroughly as possible. The farm was now a fortress, automated turrets concealed in the fields, shield generators protecting the main structures, sensor arrays providing early warning of any approach. More importantly, Jeremy and Elora had continued to refine their unique combat synergy, spending hours each day in mental connection, blending his tactical experience with her psychic abilities until they moved and thought as one. "They're coming into range," Elora said suddenly, her grip tightening. "The Mind Lord is probing our defenses." Jeremy felt it a moment later, a slimy pressure against his consciousness, like cold fingers trying to pry open his thoughts. He reinforced his mental barriers as Elora had taught him, focusing on the connection between them rather than his own defenses. "Let them come," he said grimly. "We're ready." The first Vexari appeared at the edge of the eastern field, their scaled bodies glinting in the morning sun. They moved with military precision, spreading out to surround the farm. At their center walked a larger figure, its elongated head adorned with ceremonial markings, the Mind Lord. "Now," Jeremy said quietly. Elora raised her hands, her markings blazing to full brilliance. A wave of psychic energy rolled outward from her, invisible but powerful enough that Jeremy could feel its passage like a gust of wind. When it reached the Vexari line, several warriors staggered, disoriented by the unexpected psychic assault. Taking advantage of their confusion, Jeremy activated the first line of defenses. Hidden turrets rose from the crops, targeting systems locking onto the Vexari with mechanical precision. A barrage of energy pulses cut through their ranks, dropping 3 warriors before they could react. The Vexari responded with disciplined fury, energy weapons blazing as they charged forward. The Mind Lord remained behind, its hands raised in a gesture Jeremy recognized from his nightmares, the prelude to a mass psychic attack. "Incoming!" he shouted, pulling Elora behind the reinforced wall of the porch as energy bolts slammed into the shield around the cabin. The shield flickered but held. Jeremy returned fire from cover, his old combat instincts flowing back as naturally as breathing. Beside him, Elora's face was a mask of concentration, her markings forming complex patterns as she engaged the Mind Lord in psychic combat. "He's strong," she gasped, sweat beading on her blue skin, "trying to break through to you, to use your memories against us." Jeremy felt the pressure increase, memories of Nyx surfacing unbidden, the screams of his men, the smell of burning flesh. the overwhelming sense of failure. For a moment he faltered, his rifle dipping. "Jeremy," Elora's voice cut through the fog of memory. "Stay with me. Remember what we practiced." He focused on her voice, on the cool touch of her mind against his. Together, they pushed back against the Mind Lord's assault, turning Jeremy's traumatic memories from vulnerability into weapon. The Vixari pressed closer, their superior numbers beginning to tell despite the farm's defenses. A lucky shot disabled one of the turrets, and Jeremy knew it was only a matter of time before the shields failed. "Where the hell is Harrison?" he muttered, picking off another warrior with a well-placed shot. As if in answer, the sky to the west suddenly filled with the roar of engines. 3 Colonial Defense Force dropships screamed overhead, weapon systems engaging before they even touched down. Precision fire rained down on the Vixari rear ranks, scattering their formation. The dropships landed in the western field, ramps dropping to disgorge 24 CDF soldiers in full combat gear. At their head strode a tall, silver-haired man whose bearing marked him as clearly as his general's insignia. Harrison. The Vixari, caught between Jeremy's defenses and the CDF force, hesitated. The Mind Lord, sensing the shift in momentum, intensified its psychic assault, targeting both Jeremy and the newly arrived humans. Several CDF soldiers stumbled, clutching their heads as the alien psychic attack found purchase in their unprepared minds. But Harrison remained standing, seemingly unaffected, as he directed his troops with calm efficiency. "He's shielded somehow," Elora said, her voice strained as she maintained their own defenses. "But the others won't last long against that level of assault." Jeremy made a split-second decision. "Can you project our connection? Extend your protection to Harrison's team?" Elora's silver eyes widened. "I've never attempted anything on that scale. It would require complete openness between us. No barriers at all." "Do it," Jeremy said without hesitation. "I trust you." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the last walls between them fell away. Jeremy opened himself completely, offering every memory, every fear, every hope to Elora's mind. She did the same, their consciousnesses merging more deeply than ever before. Through their joined awareness, Elora reached out to the CDF soldiers, extending the unique psychic shield she and Jeremy had developed. One by one, the humans straightened as the protection enveloped them, their minds bolstered by the strength of Jeremy's battle-hardened psyche filtered through Elora's empathic abilities. The Mind Lord recoiled, clearly shocked by this unexpected development. Before it could recover, Harrison's troops pressed forward, their coordinated assault driving the Vixari back toward the eastern perimeter. Caught between two forces and stripped of its psychic advantage, the Vixari contingent began to break. Several warriors fled outright, while others fought with increasing desperation. The Mind Lord, recognizing defeat, attempted one final massive psychic attack. It gathered its power, focusing directly on the connection between Jeremy and Elora. They felt it coming, a tsunami of alien hatred bearing down on their joined consciousness. Instead of resisting, they opened themselves further, allowing the attack to pass through them and rebound on its source. The Mind Lord's scream echoed across both physical and psychic planes as its own power turned against it. It collapsed, scaled body convulsing as neural pathways overloaded. With their psychic leader fallen, the remaining Vixari surrendered or fled. Within minutes, the farm was secure, CDF soldiers rounding up prisoners while medics tended to the wounded. Harrison approached the cabin, holstering his sidearm as he surveyed the damage with a professional eye. "Not bad for an old farmer," he called to Jeremy, "though I see you had help." Jeremy stepped forward to meet his former commander, Elora, at his side. "General Harrison, meet my wife, Elora." Harrison studied the Lumidian with undisguised interest. "So, you're the empath the Vixari were so desperate to capture?" "Impressive work out there." "It was our work," Elora corrected gently. "Neither of us could have done it alone." Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "That much was obvious. I've never seen anything like what you two did today. Extending psychic protection to an entire squad. Creating a feedback loop against a Vixari Mind Lord. The tactical applications are significant." Jeremy recognized the calculating look in his old commander's eyes. "We're not weapons, Harrison." "No," the general agreed, surprising him. "You're pioneers. What you and Alora have developed, this human-Lumidian combat synergy, it could change everything." He gestured to the farm around them. "And it started here with an old soldier and his mail-order bride." Alora slipped her hand into Jeremy's. "What happens now?" Harrison smiled slightly. "Now? Now you get official recognition and protection under human military law. The Lumidian Council has been informed of your status, and they've agreed to recognize your marriage, the first legally sanctioned human-Lumidian union." "And the Vexari?" Jeremy asked. "This attack was unsanctioned, a rogue operation by their intelligence division. With evidence of their aggression on a civilian settlement, we've got enough leverage to keep them in check for the foreseeable future." Harrison's expression turned serious. "More importantly, we want you both to train others. Your techniques could save countless lives in future conflicts." Jeremy looked at Alora, feeling the gentle touch of her mind against his. "What do you think?" he asked silently. "I think," she replied in the same manner, "that I chose very well when I selected my aging human husband." Aloud, Jeremy said, "We'll consider it, General, but first we have a farm to rebuild." Later, as Harrison's team prepared to depart with their prisoners, Jeremy and Alora stood on their porch, surveying the damage to their home. It would take weeks to repair everything, but the foundations remained strong. "I'm sorry," Jeremy said quietly, "for all this, for dragging you into a war you didn't ask for." Elora turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the setting sun. "You have nothing to apologize for, especially not your age or your scars. They saved us both today." She traced a weathered line on his face with gentle fingers. "War and farming did this to you, yes, but they also made you the man I love, strong enough to fight for what matters, wise enough to know what's worth fighting for." Jeremy pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him, despite their differences. "And what's worth fighting for?" "This," she said simply, rising on her toes to kiss him. "Us, home." As twilight settled over the farm, Jeremy felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Peace. Not the empty quiet of isolation, but the rich fullness of a life shared. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. The old human soldier and his alien bride, pioneers of a new kind of strength.